1 minute.
Okay. The national anthem? No, you don't want me.
All right. We will open the library council work session. So Wendy, do your thing.
Okay. Okay, great. Would it be good, do you think, to go around real quick and everyone to say who they are and either their position with the board or your affiliation with the library or the city? Does that sound good? You want to start over here with Glenn in the corner?
Glenn Ryan, City Administrator, Baldwin City.
Susan Pitt, City Council.
I'm Chelsea Paxton. I'm on the Finance Committee for the Library
I'm Randy Rees, I'm Treasurer on the Library Board.
Laura Hartman, City Clerk.
Casey Semino, Mayor, Baldwin City.
Julie Constantinescu, City Council.
Gerard Aarontovich, Library Board Chair.
Lynn Hughes, City Communications.
Brian Kramer, City Council.
Scott Lordson, City Council.
Corey Venable, City Council.
Mike McDonald, Northeast Kansas Library System.
Aaron Good, Vice Chair, Library Board.
Jana Harris, Library Board.
Barbara Matthews, President of Fairfield Library.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm Wendy. I'm the director of the library. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I feel really grateful to have all your brains and your energy in this room talking about the library. So I have a presentation that is kind of an overview. It does go into some detail, but I imagine you'll have questions and conversation and all of that. So if at any point there's something you want to ask, just let me know, or I can also just go through and we can go in depth where you want to after that. So, so the last time I talked to City Council was in July, and you guys might remember that we talked about the library being a colorful quilt, meaning that we do many different things. Oh, thank you, Lynn. There's many different pieces to what we do, and it all comes together to make one beautiful, functional thing. So I was challenged to come up with a new metaphor for tonight, and I accepted the challenge. So here it is, drum roll please. Your metaphor for tonight's topic is funding your library is like growing a garden. You plant seeds, you invest resources, and it grows and provides for the whole community. Yes?
Yeah, very good.
Good. Okay, so let's get started. I want to start with what are our goals? What kind of garden are we trying to grow? And so we are guided by our strategic plan, and all the council folks, you got a copy of that. It's that two-sided. There are 4 strategic areas of emphasis: literacy, lifelong learning, community engagement, local history, and genealogy. And those are the areas where you're going to see our staff and our volunteers and our energy going towards. So it's an important distinction to make. I want to say a little bit too about the community engagement, especially, is something that you'll see us really working through in the community. So we are establishing and growing partnerships all over the place. We are working with USD 348 on multiple projects. We're going into classrooms. We're also working with the STAR program, working with the lunch program. So we're doing a real wide spectrum there. We're working with Baker University on multiple fronts in programming, and we're doing more and more with volunteers with them as well. we are working with, well, the city. If you look around the room and you see all of these wonderful history displays, that's part of some of the collaboration we've done with the city with the 150th and beyond. And then our Arts Center, of course, it's a natural partnership for me having worked there for so long. A recent example of partnership with them is the mural bench program that you see in Sullivan Square. So the history aspect of that was researched here in our Kansas room, and the artists took that inspiration, created the benches that are over there. So that's just an important part of how we work, and I wanted to highlight that. So what do we want to grow in our garden? We want to grow, these are areas where we are looking, these all serve our strategic plan, but specifically, where do we want to grow? We want to grow with digital inclusion. We want to grow in programming, access, and employee compensation. So increasing our funding is going to address these areas, which I see as areas of great potential and also areas of need. And to tell you just a little bit, go into a little bit more detail. When I say digital inclusion, what does that really mean we want to do? It means a lot of things, but what it boils down to is making purchases for tech equipment and software. And if you're not a person who, if you're a person who has access to internet all the time at your house, if you have a phone, it's kind of hard to imagine what it's like for those folks who do not. But there are folks in Baldwin City who do not have access to that. So it's very isolating, you might imagine. So it's a really important part of what we do. Access, we're talking about more open hours, so that means more staff hours, right? Okay, and we're talking about more programming that also translates over to staff hours. And then one really important part of what we want to talk about tonight is employee compensation. We're talking about benefits and raises there for that part of it. Okay, so to talk about options, okay, so we're talking about increasing funding, and there's different ways that we could talk about doing that. So we are going to talk about a few different ways, go into some detail, and then I guess what I want to know from you is what are your questions and where are you interested in knowing more or having us do more research. So one option to consider is repealing the 4 mil levy cap that was set in 1997. Again, I will say more about all these. Right now, I'm just going to tell you kind of what I see as some of the options. Another option is expanding the tax base by becoming a district library. We've done some research on that. In-kind support are things that would help us stretch our budget. That's things like utilities and maintenance help. An employee benefit fund. I want to pause and say just a little bit more about this. It's compared to some of the other options, it's relatively simple. It would that would essentially mean that, like you all or like the rec, there would be a way for us to create a fund. Our board would say they wanted to create a fund, and then city council could pass that. And it would become a separate budget line. So it wouldn't come from our general fund. It wouldn't come from our operating expenses. It would be a separate line in our budget, and it would allow us, it could only be used for benefits. So things like healthcare, and we could also use it to do some things like workman's comp and that kind of stuff, pay into that. Those aren't huge costs. The biggest benefit of it would be that it's just huge in employee recruitment and retention, of course, to have healthcare benefits. A lot of people assume that, well, first, a lot of people assume that we are the city, and they assume that because of that we have benefits like the city does. We don't. We don't have healthcare, and we don't have retirement at all. So those are areas where we'd like to work. And we can talk more about that if that's something you have questions on. And then the last one I put is the X factor, and by that I just mean that I really value the process of you all coming together, and there might be things that we haven't thought of that we could think of together that we can use to work together. I'm ready to turn my phone on. Okay. So funding goals. Regardless of the way that we go about increasing funding, I want to talk about how much are we actually talking, like in dollars, right? So whatever we're talking about, mill levy or other ways, what dollars are we talking about? So the thing I want you to know here is we're talking about incremental funding increases. We're not talking about all at once. We're talking about incremental increases over a period of years. What we're looking at is $7,000 to $10,000 a year over 3 to 5 years. So a total increase of about $30,000 over a 3 to 5 year period. The other thing I want to emphasize is that this funding that we're talking about, the ad valorem funding, okay, that is going to work alongside the library's fundraising and grant writing efforts to grow our budget as a whole. So it's one piece, and we feel like we're really solid partners. I put up here this year in grants, over $25,000 in grants. Now granted, this is a year where we've had some COVID grants and things like that, but really that extra ad valorem funding that allows us to have more staff hours, that allows us to expand in grant writing too. So you can kind of think of it as an investment and a way to grow all the way around. So I've listed out some of the grants there that we've gotten this year. Some good stuff there. I also want to point out that things like grants and fundraising, those are absolutely wonderful and essential, but they're usually for specific items or programs and they can't cover salaries or operating expenses. That's why that ad valorem piece is so important. It really forms the baseline of all the other things that we want to do. Okay, so now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into one of the options. So the first option that I want to talk about is the district library option. So what does that mean to become a district library? So right now, the boundaries, our service area is our city, right? And so that's where our tax funding comes from. That's our jurisdiction, so to speak. A district library would be, it would be us drawing a new boundary, right? And so in this case, we're thinking about drawing a boundary that extends beyond the city limits to other areas where we have library users. There's library users definitely outside of our city that come in and use our library. So there's a few considerations that I want to bring to your attention with the district library option. The first one that we really need to think about is that if we were to become a district library, we would potentially lose our Nichols grant. Our Nichols grant is over $20,000. And actually, Mike McDonald from Nichols is here tonight, and he can maybe talk more if he would like, if there's something he'd like to say. But Nichols is a really wonderful support network for libraries. They do all kinds of things, and the one thing they do is accreditation, and through that process, you receive funding. So we can go into all the details of why we would lose our Nichols grant if you want, but for now, I just want you to know, funding-wise, that's right away, we would be over $20,000 down from going for this option. We would need to do a petition and special election. So if we wanted to go for this option, we'd need a petition signed by 10% of the qualified electors to trigger a special election. Then there would be the cost of doing those things, which we would have to figure out how that would work, both for the election and the petition. The boundaries of the district is another thing we want to think about. So what we looked at, and I want to give a shout out to Mike for helping me with this research. We looked at townships. So it makes sense, if you look at where our users map out, it makes sense that we could potentially draw a district around Palmyra and Willow Springs. It doesn't make sense when you look at our users for us to include Marion Township in that. So what I did was I went through, and again, this is not a perfect calculation, but this is with the research that we did and the information that we have. So we do know that right now Palmyra Township and Willow Springs, they are taxed at 1.167 mils for their library services, and that is they are taxed through Nichols. Okay, and this gets into some of why we would lose our grant if we then made a district library. So right now they are generating, those two townships together are generating about $116,607 in ad valorem funding. So that is actually less than the library as a city library is generating right now for us. These are not 2019 numbers, but we're at more like 138,000. So if you did this hypothetical district library consisting of Palmyra and Willow Springs, we'd need to raise the mill levy for those folks to about 2.070 just to break even, okay? And then we would need to do an additional mill levy increase beyond that to increase our funding. So what questions do you have about this? Yes.
So what are Palmyra and Willow Springs spending their library services tax money on?
So it is going to Nichols. Mike, do you want to talk about that? This is Mike McDonald from Northeast Kansas Library System, which we are a member of as our library.
So, the state is split up into 7 regional systems. We cover the 14 counties of Northeast Kansas. In Douglas County, Baldwin City taxes within the city limits. Eudora just formed a district, but it's within the same footprint as their previous township library. And Lawrence taxes within the city limits. Nichols taxes everybody else in Douglas County, and then we in turn give out grants and all the services that we provide. But because of that, people that live in the outlying areas can go to any library in our system and get a card, use the services.
Yes.
Does that?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. And we don't really know how much usage that those people in those townships are actually leveraging any of the libraries in the system. Is there any data that says?
Well, we mapped, we have a piece of software that we can map addresses. So we took all the addresses from your patron database and mapped them so we could just see what the distribution was with the different townships. And I've got the numbers here, there's quite a few. So the assumption would be that a lot of those people are actively using the library.
If we went with this district library, they would lose the ability to go to any other library than this one?
No.
Okay, so what are they trading for the proposed tax increase?
No.
Are they getting more access? I mean, what's the message to those people?
To me, it's a tough message. The message is your mill levy goes up, you have the same library access that you've always had.
But the mill levy goes down for citizens living in Baldwin.
Yes.
That's true.
Is it a certainty that if the library districts that they lose the Nichols funding?
That has been the pattern, because we'll lose some of our tax.
Right. I thought it was left kind of maybe as a
It's-
possibility.
It goes to the executive board for approval.
Okay.
If you were to petition to keep your grant, essentially.
So,
And to become a district, ultimately, it'll go to the state library board. They're part of this sequence of events.
I forgot to mention, go ahead.
well, I guess a question, you included Palmyra and Willow Springs, the other townships in our school district. Because when I envision this, our school district is Baldwin in my mind. Do we know where they're using the library? Are they not using the library as often? I mean,
The school district?
like the other townships within our school district, because you chose 2 of them, or you have data from 2 of them that primarily uses. But the other townships within our school district, do we have data to where do they use their library at?
So I know from what Mike and I looked at, Marion Township they don't look like very big users of our library. What are the other townships in the school district?
I'd have to look at a map.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that, but my question is why, if you went to a township or a district library, why exclude any township within our school district? Why wouldn't we just make our school district a district? Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of it was based on distribution. Not all of the addresses successfully mapped, but 49 patrons mapped in Marion Township, which is not a lot. That represented 1% of all the addresses that we mapped.
And that's why I was curious if we have 40, you said 40 or 400?
No, there were 49
49 of those patrons, so
that mapped.
I was curious if you guys had a way to figure out, okay, where are the other ones? Are they using other libraries, or are they just not using the library?
Well, in Marion, we know that a lot of people are using Overbrook.
Okay. And that was my question.
And with your school district boundaries, I imagine you have a lot that would be using Wellsville, potentially.
Okay.
And the school district boundaries, interesting, but just a little sliver of it is in Franklin County.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have, from an election standpoint, you'd have to include those folks.
The other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to say that goes along with this is that any cities included in the district must be cities of the third class. So I know we are now, but if you have plans to change that, then that would change the ballgame for us in terms of district libraries. Is that right, Mike?
It would, if you became a city of the second class, you would need to get a legislator to carry special legislation forward to the state. That's what Eudora had to do. In order for that district to be formed, Senator Holland had to take it forward.
What if it's an already existing district and then you change the city of the second class? Does that?
That's a good question. My sense is, I want to say it's just at the point of creation.
Okay. That would make sense. That would make sense. I
You
just didn't
can't-
know if there was any nuances.
Block progress. But we can research that.
It'd be good to know, just to know what timing of decisions might have impact on each other.
I believe it's the fall is when populations are certified for cities, like September, October of next year.
Yes, we got a year before
Yeah.
we're certified. And I'm not sure with the pandemic, we've talked about this a little bit, that, since Baker let out, we thought we'd go to the city of the second class a lot sooner because we'd be counting Baker students. Well, with the pandemic, they weren't part of the census this year. So that changed our whole thinking on if we would be bumped up.
Well, I know what Eudora went through. That was a gargantuan experience for them to do that. They have committees go testify several times in Topeka. And shoebox is full of documentation. So if we do make that jump and have to go through this, it's no easy task.
And Eudora, I think, they changed from a township library to a district library. They weren't a city library, so it's a little different than our situation. Yeah.
Now, Wendy, did we ever, just on this doesn't affect this, but I know at one point we looked at adding somebody from your board from the county. Did we end up doing that?
So actually, I think everybody right now is in the city limits, right? But you approved that we could have 2 board members that were from the school district.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just widened the net a little bit. Yeah.
But were they voting members, or could they be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All library board members are
Okay.
the same.
We go through so many boards and stuff, and appointees, it's like every month, and sometimes I forget the balance of how that works, but it makes sense, especially if they're gonna be taxed in the
Right.
district, they would have to be represented.
It would probably make sense that if we went to a district, we would change. I mean, it would be from the district, I would think, our board.
District library would
Yeah,
draw board members from throughout the district.
that makes sense.
And they are elected. But it's not an election, like you have people come and go to the polls. You would have a special meeting each year in the spring, I think it's in April, and it's published, we're having this meeting. And if 20 citizens come, then those are the folks that are voting. If several hundred come out, then.
So it's not like a township election where they're on the ballot.
Right.
Interesting. Thank you, Mike. Anything else that we want to talk about for this one? We can always come back as well. If you have other things.
I think it was great information. Thank you.
Okay, so this slide is about the option of the mill levy cap. So it was set in 1997, like I said. And I want to remind you that really, when we think about this, we're talking about the mills, but essentially it's about the dollars, right? So we're thinking about that $7,000 to $10,000 a year over 3 to 5 years for an increase of $30,000 over a 3 to 5 year period. So at the current valuation, this would mean approximately a 0.2 mil increase per year for 3 years. And again, we're gonna assume that the total assessed valuation stays the same. It won't, but in order to have a conversation about it for now. So right now, a 0.2 mil increase equals $5.75 per year increase on a $250,000 home. So again, I want to stress that this is more simple because this is the current mechanism that we're using. It's just removing the cap that's there and then allowing us to incrementally increase that mill rate. It's possible we can increase the mill less than 0.2 a year or even hold steady in a given year. Again, depending on the total assessed valuation, if it goes up a significant amount and it allows us to hit that, again, it's about the dollars, that 7,000 to 10,000 that we're looking at, then, we could hold steady. We could do slightly less than 0.2. And again, remember with all of these options, you're working with library fundraising, you're working with grant writing so that that total budget is growing as a whole. The ad valorem tax is really about giving us that yearly operating, functionality, that yearly operating support. Is there questions about this one? What do you guys want to talk about?
I have a couple. Do you know what your previous years, because obviously here in the recent last 5 years, let's say, we saw assessed valuations increase around 5% roughly. Do you know what that equated to your funding on those 4 mills over the last few years?
I'm going to ask my treasurer, Randy, do we remember what it was last year to this year?
I didn't hear what your percentage was.
Well, I think roughly it's been around 5%. I mean, obviously it changes each year, the assessed valuation.
Sure, so 5% on 100 and let's say 30,000 would be $6,500.
Okay, but you don't have the exact numbers,
I don't.
because I know they fluctuated in the last
I know.
few years.
I don't have that history on it.
That's
But I know again, next year it's up about $8,000.
Okay.
From this year to next year, the projected increase is 8,000 on the tax base.
So we could hit 10 by taking it, I mean, we can't, obviously we have to go through a process, but if that cap wasn't there, we could hit that 10K goal by going up just a tiny bit. Yes. So it's a good question.
Help me understand, you mentioned, fundraising and other, working in conjunction with that. Are you setting an annual increase goal and then the mill levy increase or amount for that year would be adjusted based on the success of fundraising, or is that just mill levy and then additional whatever can be raised by other means? What's your thinking there?
So it's a good question. So when I think about the grants, like I said, those are usually right now, at least for specific projects and specific goals that are not related to operating expenses. So when we set a goal, like let's say we work a lot with the Friends group, we'll have a plan, for example, that we're going to do a project where we're going to add an office and a study room next year. We know that. And so we knew that we wanted to ask Friends for $5,000 for that. We knew that the grant was going to cover $5,000. So that's a project that we planned for. But I don't want to say it's separate from the ad valorem because it's not, like it's all in the same bucket, but the ad valorem is covering right now, it's covering salaries and building for us. And then the rest of the stuff that's kicking in is covering, the other aspects of the budget, if that makes sense.
Yep. And it sounds like you're looking to keep that separation going forward.
And it's a mental like it's kind of, it's all the same budget, it's all the same bucket.
It is some mental, but some, as you say, can be used only for certain things. So,
Right.
So it really isn't all one bucket, right?
Right.
It's one budget, but there are separate funds that can be used for different things, so.
Right, and then we have accreditation standards, so we know that for our budget, like we need to hit a certain percent of our income needs, like 12% needs to go towards our collection for the year, right? So that is set, essentially. We know that 60% needs to go towards, at least 60% needs to go towards our payroll, those kinds of things. And Mike can probably talk more about that kind of stuff if you want, but that's part of our accreditation process.
That helps things.
Yeah.
If if I could just add a little, right? So if we're doing 65% salary and we've got, I can't remember, is it over 10 grand, $15,000 for building operation, utilities and all that stuff?
Right.
So all of a sudden we're down to roughly $35,000 we use for programming.
No, our programming is more like $3,000 right now.
Well,
Yes.
plus I'm adding the books.
Oh, gotcha.
And the other, what you
Okay.
call collections is books and DVDs and magazines.
Right. Right. Moving on.
I just have one question. This might be for our city staff. Would this take a supermajority from the council to repeal like like a charter ordinance, or is this just what type of?
Blake's not here tonight, but I think you're correct. It is a charter ordinance.
So we're taking-
overturn a charter ordinance. Yeah, it has to be a supermajority.
Okay.
Okay, this is one that you've got in your packet. And this is just really to add some perspective, I guess, and look at peer libraries. So Mike helped me do this research. He helped me identify 21 libraries in Kansas that can be considered our peers, right? They have about the same legal service area as Baldwin City, and they're similar to us in other ways. And so what we did was we looked at, for all of these 21 peer libraries, the average library fund revenue per capita, and then we ranked ourselves. And Baldwin City is, in that set of 21, we were third from last in terms of our funding per capita. And so again, I provide this for a big picture view and just to say, like, is it time to reevaluate funding and see if there's a way we can move up? I want to see us winning with our little bar.
Wendy,
Yes.
were you able to figure out if we had, let's say, $30,000 extra in funding, where that would put us on this scale? Would that put us in the middle?
I did not figure that out, but if you think about the legal service area, if you think about even a couple dollars more per person, we're talking about like 4,000 people. Am I thinking about this right? So if you talk about $2 or $3 more, that really puts us kind of where we're thinking we want to be. Because that times 4,000 people is a bump of $15,000. I think, if I'm doing that right in my head.
Population of the legal service area, that's population of Baldwin.
Right. Yes, so these libraries have plus or minus 1,000 legal service area from us. So there should be about the same size. All right. This one you've seen before, and I really feel like this is a strong reason for reevaluating our funding. This is really important to me, so I'm putting it up here again. This to me gets to what extra funding would allow us to do, and I think it's really important. This shows city employee compensation versus library employee compensation, just a comparison. And I love that you pay your crossing guard $12.36. Being a crossing guard is a super important job. So is being a librarian, and I think we can do the same for our librarians. We have, someone who's been working there 3 years and is still at $10 an hour. So really, where we feel the crunch of that cap, it's being felt here. And so we ask a lot of our employees, and they do a lot for us. They have to have tech skills, they have to have great communication skills, they have to be multitaskers, they have to stay up to date on technology and trends. We're asking them to manage multiple projects at the same time most often. And they have to sometimes deal with challenging people and situations. And so I really feel like it's merited to look at these particular stats when we're talking about increasing funding. This also goes back to what I said before. Our part-time employees, they don't have any benefits. So if we could think of that employee benefit fund, establishing that even, and getting some health care, there are ways, there's some things that have developed, where it's more affordable. We could have some cost certainty for the library if we set it up in certain ways so we could control our costs. So we could set that employee benefit fund up and control our costs so that it wouldn't hurt, our bottom line. We wouldn't get into a situation we couldn't afford, and yet we could still offer that benefit to our employees at the same time. And Mike knows more about that and can talk more about that if you want to hear more. But so employee benefits could also be a piece of this.
You did a comparison similar to your revenue per capita based on just these same cities and where their same library job titles are and what they're making? I mean, how do we compare that way?
It's a good question. I can run that for you and find out. I have looked at it. What you see a lot of times is they're definitely employing more hours than us. So you can see in their total spending that, I think it was Eudora I looked at. I mean, they're spending their payroll expenses for the year, and ours, I think it was like $100,000 difference. So they're employing a lot more hours. We've at our library, we've been really lucky. We've done a lot of things with volunteers, and honestly, that's not the direction I want to go. We need our librarians, our professionals, doing the jobs where we shouldn't be asking our volunteers to do that kind of work. So yes, I can figure that out for you.
Yeah, I just want to know if it's just a situation that's unique to Baldwin City, or is this disparity kind of where it happens in every city? You've got this library staff versus city staff pay disparity.
I think in general, library folks are underpaid and are paid less. I would say that's true. Mike, would you say that's the case?
Yes.
Yes.
I do like Scott's though. I would like to see comparison with other libraries, the same comparison that we saw in that other graph.
They're making
This
this
one.
one $10 an hour.
So every year, libraries are required to fill out a statistical survey. Wendy had the pleasure of doing that for the first time this past January. The most recent salary figures that are available will be from 2018. The 2019 ones hopefully will come out before the end of the year. But we should be able to run that comparison for you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Other questions or conversation around this one?
Wendy, have we been on several years without pay increases for these people?
I'm not sure. I'm new enough that I know they haven't had one this year at all. So I don't know if others that are on the board can speak to that maybe.
I used to work there, I retired from working here. And in the past, previous boards, for whatever reason, did not follow too closely the rule of the 64% going towards payroll. And the previous boards did not, for all sorts of reasons, request the sort of increase, and that's that we're asking for now. And that's why we're behind. That's why the crossing guards get more than the person with the master's degree. So the way in which previous boards worked was to count the paper clips and that sort of thing. And raises were given, no joke, it was a big raise if you got an extra 25 cents an hour. So we've just been way behind and have not done what we need to do just to keep up with everybody else. People were even asked to work off the books previously just to get by. And no one could conceive of asking a public works employee to go home on their own time at their kitchen table and order inventory for the city. But that's what we were asked to do. So we are now really trying to become a library of the 21st century and catch up.
If you think too about, again, recruitment and retention, and folks usually that sometimes at least our employees are working 2 jobs because they're not working, we don't have full-time hours for them, first of all, which we would love to have if we could get more paid hours. But they have to have another job. So they're splitting their time and energy that way. And then we've had lost a couple of employees fairly recently where that part-time job offered them full-time and they went on to something else where they could do more and be paid more or have a better situation. So, people have choices. They have choices in the job market. And so when we have employees, I mean, they're trained, they learn our entire system for managing all of the information. A lot of them have, institutional knowledge, like the knowledge that one of our employees has of this Kansas room. That would be really hard to replace if she were to move on to a different position. So those kinds of things are valuable and good to think about too. Move on. I think I'm to the end of mine. Yeah, we're back to the garden. So, yes, Randy.
I didn't know if we were done with budget or not. Are we done with budget? Because I just wanted to add. Well, it's the people in this room that had done 2 good things for the library in the last 2 months. One was we got clarity on insurance and auditing allocations.
That was
I don't know if that's
Lynn and
Lynn
Laura.
and Laura
Yep.
or beyond that. But that allows us certainty in our budgeting. And we blew our budget out by like $2,000 this year. So that's a big help. Number 2 is, again, I assume it goes further than this, but we got that city library property agreement where basically the city's going to take care of the outside of the building and we'll take care of the inside of the building. Once again, a big help. I don't think there's ever been such an agreement in the history of the library, from what I understand, from Barb shaking her head.
That you're
So-
correct, yeah. You're exactly correct. There's never been anything, it was always a very loosey-goosey kind of handshake sort of arrangement. Nothing had ever been put down on paper.
Being new to this anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. That really just helps us as we're doing what we need to do on the budget.
Yes, thank you, Randy. Do other board members want to say, other library board members want to add or say anything else?
I'll say that Wendy's done a great job, and part of the things that we're asking for is we do have that $10 an hour mark, and one of the goals that we really want to do is get that up there. And employee retention, you guys have great employees at this library, and they do a ton of work, and we'd like to retain them, and we'd like to support that and maybe give them the option and a better thought so they don't leave, and maybe they can stay here. And some of it boils down to just the line of the benefits. If you can get somebody a little bit of the benefits of staying, along with the raises, but it seems, it'll cost money, but it seems simple to make that thing, but we can't do it without the extra funding. And so this is new, and we really do appreciate all you guys being here and talking with us about it. So being new and having this board and this team together, we're starting the conversation. So appreciate it very much.
Yeah, so that's really what I wanted to say too, is just thank you for being here to have the conversation. First of all, it's the first time that I know of that all these minds have met together to talk in a long time about library funding and library goals, and that city library partnership, that's going to form the foundation of everything we're able to do. And I hope that you really see us as an asset to your city. We are. People, a lot of times when people come to town, one of the first things they'll do is they'll come in the library and they'll talk to us and those folks that are manning the CERT desk, and they'll say, hey, I just moved to town and first thing I'm going to do is get a library card. And we're always like, yes. But then they ask us, questions, and it really does make a difference. Your library is sort of a little bit of your front door sometimes, especially for certain folks. So this is my little ending metaphor, is that ad valorem tax, that's the baseline, that's the ground level. If we can build off of that and we can grow. So those grants that we're gonna be able to get, that fundraising we're gonna be able to do, everything your library is gonna do, it's really gonna grow out of that foundation of that ad valorem tax. That's that yearly, that we know we can count on, that's always there. So just thank you for being here and talking with us about that. And that's it, that's what I have. So.
Wendy, I have another question.
Sure.
Do you know, and I'm betting you do, the users of Baldwin City residents versus the percentage of out of Baldwin City that use our library?
We can find out. Do you have that mapping with you, Mike?
I don't know if I have the exact.
When you look on the map, I know that it's very dense in Baldwin City, and then there definitely are users outside,
Is
but
that the same map that you presented? I
Yes.
think it was last year maybe, or earlier this year?
it was when we talked about board members.
Right.
Right.
So it's been earlier this year.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I didn't know if you had a specific number of just a.
This looks at all three townships. Obviously, this is your
Yeah.
cluster, but we could drill down on that.
Yeah, I'd just like to. Kind of,
I remember when we had.
We might have.
I've seen that
I think
map.
we did this exercise for adding the two board members.
So we want to know the users' percentage inside versus outside the city limits?
Yeah, just where our user makeup comes from for the library.
And then we also want to know the salary comparison among the peer libraries. That's the other one. Okay. Those are on our list.
Just to summarize and get my own head, the 30K, 7 to 10K $1,000 increase per year you're targeting for the next 3 to 5 years. And the property tax, which I've learned this year, is the same as ad valorem tax.
That's a finance committee joke.
And it hasn't been beaten to death.
Just
at all.
wanted to throw it out there.
It only took us 3 months to get there.
Used to get
That's an inside joke, come on.
Hey,
But that's a separate discussion from the district library option, other than maybe the size of the tax base so are we linking the two, or are those two separate decisions, or?
so the mill levy cap and the district library are two totally different
Okay.
processes. Mill levy cap would be keeping the same funding mechanism we have now, just lifting the cap,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense. And then allowing that, that mill levy rate to creep up incrementally over time. District library would be like whole new ball of wax.
So it's an either or, not necessarily a portion of both?
Right, I don't know that there's a way to do a portion of both. I think if you become a district library, then you're saying this is the taxing entity in the district.
Scott, I think we have to choose which road we go down.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure
Go
out.
down the district road, go down increasing the mill road.
If you form a district library, the library would obviously still be a partner with the city on accomplishing goals. But the district library is itself a taxing entity. So they set the mill.
Who sets that mill? Like for a district
The
like
district library determines how many dollars they need for the budget. And then they let the county know this is what we need. Go levy the tax that's gonna.
So they get, their governing body
They have
has a
budget
say
authority.
for their patrons serving within that.
I'm sorry, I
They're-
cut you off, sorry.
The library board then has a say in their own budget over that
Right.
district.
Yes.
They're essentially a city council for their district.
I'm sure up to a point.
No, isn't it?
No,
It's,
it's their
Well,
budget
but
to set.
But the county has to through, right? So they become, so they're unelected.
They are their own, well, you come in the
Okay.
spring to
So they-
elect them. Yeah,
So I don't know, but they're
But they are elected. You just
They
have to
are
show up to
elected,
that meeting.
but it's not a go to the polls and vote. It's come to this meeting in
Right.
April. Statute spells out the specific day and time and everything. I don't
Right.
remember exactly, but it's in April.
So it seems like a district would almost be the preference. Am I wrong there?
I'm not sure. When I think about a district, I think about your question of how, so the folks are already using our library out in the district, and then we need to have some kind of reasoning to tell them, we're gonna raise your mill levy by this amount for the same, I mean, it's the same. And they would have to vote for that, so we can't just create it.
Sure.
We'd have to have, first of all, we'd have to have a petition that would get 10% of the electors' signatures on it. And then that would trigger a special election, right? So there's a few layers to it.
I didn't mean the easiest way. I meant just for the library to have more autonomy in their own budget.
There's gotta be regulation around, mill levy increases, just like the city has.
I would assume that the state cap still applies
Yeah.
to that body, correct?
So district libraries are subject to whatever the state legislators come up with.
But like we have to abide by the state cap that they enacted 4 years ago. Is that the same as for our district library? Do they have to abide by that same cap, that mill levy cap that we have to abide by?
Well, I don't think of it as a cap. The district libraries can only grow so much from year to year.
1.5%
Yeah.
without going for a special election. Isn't that what the city is under? Isn't that the state regulation for
I
that?
think we can go up to like 1 point some mills.
It's actually a dollar amount,
Yeah.
which would of course equate to mills and whatever, but it depends on our assessment,
Yeah.
inflation, rates and all that. But it's an actual dollar amount.
And I guess that's the same, the question is, do they abide by that same rules that the cities do? On increase in their mills?
Libraries have their own set of rules for what a city library or a township library would have.
Right, but you said, 1.5% a year, right? And you can't exceed that. Okay. So, I mean, functionally, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without a vote.
Right.
So really, what is the advantage of a district library? I mean, it seems like it's kind of the same thing, one hand or the other, right?
I think, for me, we're not guaranteed that we can create this. This would be something that we would attempt to do, and then we would have to get it passed. We'd have to get the signatures, and then we'd have to get it passed.
But what advantage will that give you over what you would have?
Speaking from my personal opinion, if there are concerns that you have, if you're worried, if there's some concern you have about the current system that we have and lifting the cap, can we address those concerns in another way and stay in the system that we're in? For example, you could repeal and replace a cap. If you're worried and you don't want us to just think, well, those crazy library folks, they're gonna raise it 2 mils or whatever, you could repeal the 4 cap and do a 5 or whatever. Mike had an interesting idea, and I don't know if this is the case, but it could be the case also, we could look into it. Can you put a % cap on us per year, like your cap that you have? Like, can you say, you can increase it by this much per year, and then that is kind of the built-in controls that you wanna have?
I bet you could.
So, I don't know, we can find that out. Yeah.
From my perspective, this is definitely gonna take another work session.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of
Yeah.
information,
I mean, to Julie's point though, really fundamentally what we're doing theoretically is moving 4 mills off the city, taxing line items and moving it out somewhere else, right? That wouldn't even be under the city line anymore. It'd be under the district county line. It'd have a separate 4 mills or 5, whatever it is, that would become, so kind of just move it outside, bigger base to tax, but obviously less control by the city. It'd be more county controlled and the city in the library board. I mean, that's how I see the difference.
That's kind of, I'm right there with you, Scott. That's kind of what I gained from this conversation, just spreading out the tax base a little bit. And then obviously more autonomy to their board to control that. What I don't know is, how that does affect you. I mean, you get the same formulas across that district,
No.
or does that have to be voted in? How all that stuff works. I just don't have those answers.
My understanding is that they're at 1.167 right now, is that right? They're currently being taxed for library services.
Nichols is taxing everybody in Douglas County that's not being taxed by a local library. 1.167 mils.
So you would have to tell people, hey, your taxes are going up, but you're not getting any improvement in services. And you'd have to try and sell that and have people say, yeah, we'll vote for that. So it might be a little tough.
Some people, other people, it might go down in the city. Right?
I don't know if it would go down.
It would go
So
down.
the city citizens it would.
Actually,
Yeah,
the
no.
bigger base would go down, and probably the smaller base would be hit with higher tax.
Something we need to look at, I can't remember, we've looked at a lot of state statute and a lot of research. I can't remember or not, but I believe it's possible that each township has to vote it in, or it doesn't go. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not just the whole district voted, it's like Willow Springs said yes or no, and then,
In or out, yeah.
Palmyra said yes or no, and then,
Yeah, as a comparable, Mike, is it Eudora that's a district library?
yes, they're a district.
So,
Were they
do
not
you know what their levy is across there?
So I don't have their numbers.
2 or 3?
Yeah, I don't have their numbers in front of me. Eudora started as a township library. And then the city, I need to research this. I wrote this down. You were asking about cities of third class and second class. What happened was that the city became the city of the second class, and they could no longer be taxed by the township. So that was a problem. And so they had to use special legislation to work that out. But I think the city, they just felt like a district library made more sense for them. And so that was the path that they chose to take.
And I talked to.
But it didn't change, because the district lines matched the township, it didn't change who was being taxed. It wasn't more people being taxed or less people being taxed. It was the same, same group of folks in the township.
You can only probably speak to Northeast Kansas, but what's the frequency of district? I mean, how often do they pop up?
We have the most. Lewisburg, Meriden, Donovan County District, Baser, and Linwood. We have 5.
Okay.
There's probably not 5 in the rest of the state.
Do you know the reasoning of why they went to district versus the city library?
Who?
Those 5. Do you know any? Did you hear any of the reasons, the pros and cons?
That
Why they made their change?
we need to research. That was before
Oh, okay.
my time. But
I
yeah,
didn't
I
know
mean,
if it was recent.
we can talk to them.
I'm sure it was conversations
Sure.
just like this.
Yeah, any questions that you have? I mean, I'll be able to just tell Wendy I can't get that, but I'll try. Whatever you have.
I do know that Eudora's funding stayed about the same from when they were the township to when they were the district, because I did talk to their director about that, and she said it's pretty similar. Well, and which makes sense, because it's the same boundaries. Yeah.
So they didn't add.
I believe it's,
They did not increase their footprint.
Okay.
It remained exactly the same.
Some of the things, guys, that we're trying to do is midterm and more long-term goals, much like you guys on the council. Some of the things that you set in place, you're not gonna be here, you're not gonna be on the council when it comes to fruition. And that's kind of the similar things that we're gonna go through is, some of us aren't even going to be on the same board, hopefully Wendy's still here to see it go through. So what we're trying to do is set it in place, and we ask you to remove the cap. To go to a district would almost kind of, if I'm looking at the numbers and what we've been shown, it puts us at even if almost like a little bit of a step back to get that long-term goal. For us to get to our longer-term goals, the cap is the thing that would help the quickest and the fastest and help some of us actually see what we would like to achieve as a whole. So that's part of the reason for us trying to talk to you guys and get these guys figured out. And maybe the district library is a good thing, but it is a more long-term goal for us to achieve.
I've seen some interesting charter ordinances, so, Winnie and I were talking, I don't see why you couldn't pass a charter ordinance that put a cap on the incremental increases that could happen from year to year, as opposed to just setting a hard new cap.
I know we've asked this and kind of talked about it. Do we know why that cap was put in place in the first place?
Back in the late 90s.
Before all our times?
I know. I remember writing it down specifically, so I was like, what?
So a lot of these caps did, I mean, they go back into some of them into the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, about 1/3 of our city libraries have a cap. And they have been at the ceiling, levying right up at that top point for years. When we compare that to city budgets, over time, the library is growing at a much slower rate. You guys are not alone in this. Carbondale is grappling with this. Burlingame repealed their cap, and they don't have one anymore. Those are the two that I worked with recently. Carbondale did put a new cap in place.
That's what I was gonna ask.
But they have such a unique situation. They're moving into a new building, and the city wants moving out of the city hall building into their own building. And the city just wants them to pay for all of it themselves. So they gave them a new ceiling and said, work with that.
I think it's definitely, we could, something we'll send to finance committee, obviously, and possibly to legislative committee, to just do some research on the district, you know, all that type of stuff, just 'cause it's so new. I've got more information tonight on the library district than I've ever gotten, so I appreciate that. I appreciate all your guys' information because they help me. I never write. You can't read it, but I wrote down some notes to take back. So I do appreciate all of that. But I do think it's probably something we need to send to committee, start discussing and how we want to go through, and we'll probably have to pass through 2 or 3 committees before coming back to the council, just so we kind of get all the boxes checked, I guess.
For the legislative committee, I would want to maybe get some clarification on the consequence of going to city class 2.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, look into that.
And if you can do it before to avoid the.
Yeah, I think at the next council meeting, we'll just probably assign this same topic to both of those committees.
Scott on both.
I know. We'll get double
Twice in the middle.
I got a chance of learning it then. I guess I'd suggest though that I think that's a great plan, but you know, I guess what I'm struggling with is, you know, as we really work through our strategic plan, and if we believe that the library is a critical part of, you know, what our vision is, you know, do we give up control by saying, here's a district, you know, good luck, we'll see you, you know, we'll see you 10 years down the road, or do we make it part of the strategic plan with all this information about what they're trying to do? Does it fit with the vision? You know, the funding, you know, and then the funding is there from the city because it's a part of what we think the city should do based on, on the funds that we have. So I think it's a strategic planning discussion as well from council perspective.
I completely agree. That's why I said I think we're gonna have to have another work session.
Yeah.
But I'd almost like the committees to get a little bit more information
Great
from
point,
our
yeah. Bring that
financial
forward.
advisor, a
Yeah.
little bit more information on the legislative side
Yep.
with the change since, changing the classes of the city. So that way we have that also for the work session.
Agreed.
Is there any danger in two committees talking about the same topic?
I don't think so, because they're all open meetings.
Yeah.
And you're looking at two different sides of it. You're looking at financial and the legislative changes that could affect the district.
And there'll just be the two in the committees that'll be having that conversation separately also.
You know me, I always have to ask.
You just out of trouble.
I'm glad you do, otherwise I would clarify.
But no, I think you're right. Absolutely. That's a great point. Bring as much information forward that you can make a decision about the whole strategic plan with as much information as you have. So that's great. Great idea.
I would be thrilled, we would be thrilled to be that big umbrella planning and how the piece that we can provide, I think we can be powerhouse partners for the city. I
Yeah.
really do.
I think it's important you keep bringing forward the vision of what you want to do and how that's going to potentially impact the citizens. I mean, because that's why you're spending the money. The goal is this, right? And just so having that front and center all the time with some idea of impact and how it would reach just helps make a better decision because you can speak to why you're spending the money.
Yeah, because either way for us and for elected people, we're thinking, I'm thinking in my head, this is a tax increase. This is going to be, well, it's just raising the cap possibly, and then it's up to your board to vote, I guess, for those increases. For the council's decision, it's a tax increase because you gave up that control, that extra $1 or $2 million, whatever the council were to decide. So it's just a lot of discussion. And to Scott's point, I like that just showing to our citizens, hey, yes, this is a tax, but this is what you're getting for that. This is where it's going to improve. Is I think very important, that communication part of it. So I think it's definitely going to be some good discussions, good information. Keep coming out of it. But I do think we'll have to schedule. This will have to be part of our strategic planning work session as well, but also just a standalone work session again. Once we get more information. It possibly may include more people to pull in, just people with more experience or more, like you, sir, coming in to, give that perspective from other communities too that are handling, dealing, or even the state level, come in just to answer more questions that may arise from that committee discussion. But great information tonight. I think it was very much needed.
Thank you so much for everybody I know you're very busy people and we just appreciate having you all in the room and all the conversations. So thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.